I'm Dr. Pete Economo, the East Coast psychologist.
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin, the West Coast psychologist.
And this is When East
Meets West.
So we are going to elaborate on our tagline of Be Present, Be Brave. Hey, Nikki.
Hey, Pete. How you doing?
Good. I know that it's been a fun time kind of putting this out there and, be present, be brave. I thought, we could talk about what it was like when we first started this podcast.
Yeah.
We were trying to figure out, like, how do we begin? How do we end? Is there music?
Yes.
Is there not music? And
Yes.
I think we've come to like a nice little formula.
Yeah, we've come to a little formula, and we definitely played around with how are we gonna tie this up? What's gonna be our little tagline at the end? Which, I don't know. Maybe some people think it sounds silly, though. I will share one of my dear friends listened to the podcast and was like, "I love your tagline." I was
That's
like,
so
well, "Thank you," because Pete and I actually spent quite a while trying to determine what small little phrase can capture what we're trying to talk about in the podcast.
Well, yeah, and it was all about like syllable count, and so I of course referenced Ellen DeGeneres because she says "be kind to one another" at the end of hers.
Yes,
That's
you
become
did.
like a tagline, and so I think taglines are important, but also like what embodies of what we're actually trying to do, right?
Absolutely.
This bridging between psychological Western science and then spiritual Eastern practices, and thinking about that. So I pulled up we have a couple little renditions that we went through.
Yeah.
Right. Remember, we were like we even shared our screen, which you're a little bit of a technophobe. Can we say that?
No, I'm not a technophobe. Because I think that implies I don't like using technology, which I do like using technology. I get because I'm really into privacy. I'm like, screen sharing. That makes me
Yeah.
feel like violated. I don't like it that much. Yeah. Yeah.
For what it's worth, whenever I'm doing like these webinars now in the world of virtual learning, I'm like, if I have two screens up, I always make sure everything's over on the other screen so that I'm only sharing that one thing, because there is this that is like the ultimate vulnerability. If
Yes, it's just like,
something.
So you shared your screen. I didn't. I didn't share mine.
I shared my screen. Yeah. Even with me, as comfortable as you are, you felt like maybe.
I did. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So share some of the ones that we
So
went through.
we came. The ending. We called it the ending then. So now we have this fancy tagline. So we were like, act, accept, and be. So we thought about maybe, again, it's about like the rhythm of it, the prosody, like what actually makes sense, the syllable usage, but also like the act pieces, because we're focused on action, which is, I guess, the brave, or
that's
brave.
That's the brave. Well, I think like we're always trying to acknowledge the dialectic between the East and the West, and the acceptance and the change, right? And so we really wanted to somehow communicate this is about action, and it's also about presence, I guess, about acceptance. I think we really settled on the be present part fairly quickly.
That was because then be East, be West. We didn't like that, but that was sort of there. We wanted to focus on mindfulness and behaviorism, right? So that's the mindfulness of the present, and then brave is the behaviorism. Okay, so like main ones that we really narrowed it down between was be present, act with courage, which we liked it. We were there, but it wasn't be present, act bravely. And then Nikki, my grammar guru, was all like, well, the adverb and
I do have an undergraduate degree in literature and writing, so
I may or may not often send Nikki some of my documents.
Yeah. I do love grammar. I do love to edit.
You some editing.
I really do. Well, so maybe we can say a little bit more about, like, maybe we could break down like these two components of like why we ended up settling on be present, be brave, because I think we're definitely expressing that, we wanted to capture in a bite-sized way this balance between mindfulness and action. So I don't know, can we start a little bit talking, or speaking of grammar, spend a little bit talking, so a little time discussing what does being present mean? If we're saying be present, like what does that mean? What are we asking people to do?
Yeah, well, this is, I think, one of the most challenging things for people to do within the world of mindfulness. There's these quotes that says like the present moment passes through the present moment. And I was on a retreat once, and I love me my retreats.
I know you do.
And
silent retreats too. You guys should know. Pete does. I'm always like, I was like, that sounds awesome.
You know what?
In theory,
that might be what I'm missing right now, to be honest. Is that I'm missing a few things, but that's one of them. But my teacher there, Roshi Kennedy, said there is no present moment. And I was like, oh, hell no. You know, it's like you spend all this time learning this stuff. You're like, the present moment is it. But the idea in the Zen world is that once you realize and accept the present moment, it's already gone. So to be,
Yeah.
you know, and so one present moment passes through the next, and that's what. So what it means to be present is just to observe,
Hmm.
you know, to observe where you are in this moment, you know, at that moment. Because guess what? The good news is then that moment's already gone. You know,
Well, yeah, and I think that that hopefully will resonate with people because we get so attached to what we think we know about the future, frankly,
yes,
right?
yes,
Like that we always think like, but this is going to happen. It's like, well, I always like to share with patients, we never ever ever have access to what's on the other side of this moment.
that's
Like
right.
ever. Like it's this moment and it's only this moment. And I'll say to people, I'm not trying to be kind of out there. I'm being actually extremely concrete.
Yeah,
It's like it's just this moment. And now it's
yeah.
this one. And now it's this one. And
Well,
now
but
it's
I
this
think
one.
like high performers, for example, they're like, yeah, but I got a goal to where I'm going, you know, and I think that's what we teach in mindfulness is that, and then that goal is created in this moment. So if you're establishing,
Yeah.
you know, it's like grocery shopping, you know, you have to
Yeah.
get, you got to make the list and you're going there in the future, but in this
Yeah.
moment, just write it.
Yeah, and I, this idea of planning, I think, can get very confusing for
Yeah.
people because planning is a useful tool. And of course, I'm going to use another traffic example. I seem to use a lot of traffic examples. I'm
Love
from
them.
LA and live here. Yeah, is I'll say to people, like, look, if you're trying to get to an appointment at 9 o'clock in the morning, and based on the general traffic patterns, you want to leave with 30 minutes to spare. You want to leave at 8:30 in the morning, and usually, like that's going to get you there on time. You could plan that,
Right.
and then there could be a road closure, an accident, and then there's traffic and you're late. So it's not to say like don't plan, but when we're talking about being present, we're really acknowledging the only information we have access to is the information available up until this moment of time. Like
Right.
you don't actually know what's going to happen. I'm not saying don't plan. I'm also just saying like, and we don't know, like
Right.
something unforeseen can occur. I mean, the pandemic is a perfect example of this.
No one was ready for that.
No one saw it coming except
Well,
for
and then
Bill
also
Gates.
just letting go of the past. Well, yeah, except
Yeah, yeah,
scientists and
yeah, yeah, right.
epidemiologists from years
Yes,
ago.
right,
But anyway,
right, right. Yeah,
uh, but also letting go of the past. So like I was,
yeah.
you know, as with just being able to crumple up whatever you're struggling with and throw it away. And I think the present moment is allowing yourself the space to say, I'm here, just here. I'm
Hmm.
letting go of what was there bothering me, and I'm not focused because I have no idea what's ahead of me.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring in sort of a similar thing that people then will often challenge me about when I'll say
Yeah,
something like that. Like that's not happening. They'll say like, but can't, aren't I'm supposed to learn from the past and like
yeah,
what I'm
yeah,
supposed to pretend it didn't happen. I'll say, look, like, and especially using behavioral terminology here, our past is what we refer to in behaviorism as our learning history, right?
yeah,
Like, of course, what's happened in the past has informed how you experience the world, what you do, how you
yeah.
think, etc. And I'll say, and reflecting on that is absolutely helpful.
Right,
And to your point, Pete, we're reflecting in this moment though.
right.
Like this is the only moment we have agency over.
Right.
Like you
Because
can't.
otherwise, think about, oh, well, she texted that guy at that time, or they got cheated on in that moment,
Mm-hmm,
or I left my keys there and that was so annoying, or that guy punched me in the face.
mm-hmm.
Otherwise, our mind creates. There's so much in memory and the brain encoding that then
Yeah.
that's really what makes it so hard to unattach. Is
Yeah, the
defenses
stories,
exactly the
yeah,
stories. Yes,
yeah, the
yes,
stories. Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, do you ever find, because I hear this a lot too, like where people get sort of then like attached to like staying in the present, they're like, I don't know, they'll do a meditation and be like, oh, it went really bad because I got distracted. And I'm like, oh, that's what's supposed to happen.
that's
It's
the
not
present
about,
moment.
yeah, you can't stay rigidly present. Like that's
Right.
not like physiologically possible. Do people say things like that to you? Like they're like, oh, I've got to stay in the moment, like,
Yeah.
or judge themselves if they're working on this stuff.
No, I
You
mean,
ever
I
feel
think
that
for
rush?
me, I'll share just personally.
Yeah, please.
No, I think no, but for me, when I first started to do this stuff, I remember like yoga where they would do some breathing before, and they'd be like, and I would end it and be like, it's so cool. I totally breathe 3 times without thinking of anything else but the breath, you know. And it was like,
Yeah,
and so now with flexibility and really present moment living, you realize that part of present moment living is that you will get distracted.
that's right.
You
Yeah.
will notice the person next to you on the
Yes.
mat. That's also part of it. And the goal is always just bring it back to the present moment because we're constantly distracted.
Totally. It's like, well,
Yeah.
I think that's what I mean in terms of like, I've definitely encountered a lot of people that have this assumption or misunderstanding that part of doing mindfulness work and being present means never being distracted. Like
Yeah.
sometimes when I, like, and look, this is sort of like the double-edged sword of all of the mindfulness availability out there now. A lot of
Yeah.
people come to now when they come to session, a lot of people have like played around with mindfulness, like tried
Sure.
the apps or, they've tried it at work or something, whereas, 15 years ago, nobody was doing that.
That's right.
So that's the awesome thing. The downside is like people will then say to me, yeah, I've tried mindfulness and, oh, I'm not very good at it because I
Yeah.
can't stay focused. And I'm like, no, no, no. I want you going in knowing you're getting distracted. Like the noticing is just like observing what's happening. And yes, you can work on pulling your attention back, but that might be like a millisecond,
That's right.
right? You're
Yeah.
not just
Well,
like, we're not going to live there all the time. Like our minds are designed to like go other places.
it's the movie director in our mind.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'll take us all over the place, and it creates stories.
It sure
I
does. Yeah.
think, geez, sometimes my mind is real creative. Uh, well, sometimes I provocatively say to like a client or an athlete, I'll be like, what if I had a thought of like wanting to just reach across this room and just punch you in the face? Right?
Totally.
It's like, because that's a movie. Like you've
Yeah,
seen it
that's right.
somewhere. It
That's
was
right.
like
That's right.
ridiculous.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean I have to actually do it.
That's right. That's right.
And so, and I can notice that that's what my movie director is doing in my mind.
Yeah. Well, and then that's being present too. It's like, I mean, we
Yeah.
could have we could have changed the tagline to like uh notice and
Yeah.
something, right? Like that's
But it
kind of the
didn't
same thing.
flow.
It
Wait,
didn't flow.
wait, Nikki, what do you think about brave then? So when we think about just this, the second part of our tagline, be brave.
I'm gonna start by saying I'm very into that part. Not that I'm not into the present part, but I'm very into the be brave
Yeah.
because this is something Pete and I talk about a lot. Is that and this again aligns with vulnerability and living aligned with one's values.
Yeah.
It takes courage to basically do the hard things that show up in our lives. Like the easy thing is always to retreat, pull the metaphorical or literal covers over our head, right?
Yes.
Bury
Yes.
our head in the sand. And I'm not judging that. Like we all do that. I've certainly done that
Yeah.
many times in my life and still do that sometimes. And nothing happens when we do that. Like we can't grow, we can't evolve. And so,
Yeah.
it really like I'm to be like very literal about it. It's like it is very brave to step into discomfort.
Oh
So
my
that's
God.
what that means. That's what that means to me. That's why I like
Yeah.
that part so much that we
Well,
identified.
it's the action piece, which as behaviors, of course,
Yeah.
we really are focused on, action and ways that we can improve ourselves. And so for the tagline, we felt like be present, be brave really encompasses like that east west, a little bit of a
Yeah.
dialectic, because we don't always want to be present, and so the being brave helps us be present.
Yes.
And for me, it was like bingo.
Yeah.
I think that was the main. We Yeah, no, that was it. So and then we landed right on that. So I think that was exactly it. And I know also in terms of like behaviorism, Brene Brown uses the acronym BRAVING. So I
Oh,
think
I
yeah.
didn't know that. What does she
Well,
mean
so
by that?
it's the idea of building trust. So as we know, like Brene Brown
Hmm.
writes a lot about vulnerability, shame. How
Mm-hmm.
do you know when to trust? Because sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
shame then impedes on it. So the 7 elements of trust are an acronym that she calls BRAVING, which is also action oriented. But it's boundaries, reliability, accountability, the vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. And so
Mm-hmm.
the idea is like so, assessing somebody who has had good boundaries or respected your
Mm-hmm.
boundaries historically, people that are reliable, that they actually do what they
Yep.
say they're going to do,
Mm-hmm.
accountability, like being okay with like the fact that we make mistakes, and
Yeah.
which is definitely a big piece of mindfulness. The vault is like you don't have to share everything in it,
Right.
and that's key, like being mindful that
Well,
like there's some things we don't
there's some.
share.
That's right, and well, there are boundaries involved in that, right? Like
There
we
we
get to
are.
determine. Yeah, there
Yeah.
we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
As you're reading through that, I'm having a thought about what I really like about like braving, like
Yeah.
I'm gonna go again. I'm gonna go real dorky
The
here.
action verb.
The gerund, the
Yeah.
ing to get real dorky here. I actually
What's a
really like that.
gerund?
It's the ing, when
That's what
you're
it's
like
called, a
going,
gerund.
a gerund, yeah, gerund.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Missed
my
that
grammar
class.
class. I was front row and center in
Oh,
sophomore year of college.
all right. Go with your gerund. Go.
So with my gen, so what I'm actually really connecting with about that, like braving, um, as opposed to what we said, which is like be present, be brave, which it has a nice ring to it. Though I do wonder if that can sort of lend itself to people misunderstanding that being present or being brave, again, sort of what we're saying before, are like static like outcomes. And it's like really like it's always an ing. It's always like braving. Like there's never going to be a time where we're just brave, right? Or we're just mindful, or we're just, happy, right? Like there's no outcome, that it's always an ing. And that's also related to like this moment to moment shifting, right? And the flexibility. And I think that's a pretty hard concept for people to wrap their minds around, because back to the stories, our brains really like something neat of like, this is our, our self-concepts, our identities. We like to, there's nothing wrong with this necessarily. Like we like to frame things in more concrete ways.
Right.
And that can get in the way of understanding that it's ongoing, right?
It's constantly happening. Yeah. And integrity is about choosing courage over comfort. So we like that.
Ooh,
that's a big piece of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Non-judgment, of course, speaks for itself, and generosity, that you can have the most generous interpretation of intentions, words, and actions. So I think, that's the thing is within this be present, be brave, is that it also requires that I might have to swallow my pride, let's say, or something.
Sure,
like that's part of it. Like, I think I'm going to try and keep reminding myself of like, not always just like psychology based things. There's also just like interpersonally based things. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
How many challenging conversations we have, whether it's in our like personal life, and that generosity. It's like, and it's part of what I was writing about in my book right now, is like, that's a big piece of also just forgiving yourself.
Yes.
And just building this like connection with something that's larger than ourselves. And I think that's brave. For me.
Yeah, no, I love what you're saying there. It is brave, and it's starting from such a place of humility, honestly, right? It's like starting from this place of not only like, so one, there's something bigger than ourselves, and also the generosity of recognizing like humans, like we're a messy species,
we sure are.
Like we're a messy species, and people mess up, right? Like we mess up, and we all do, and of course, like we mess up in varying degrees, and we all mess up. And so can we start by opening up to the opportunity for someone else to maybe shift, right? Like if you go, like I was just thinking when you were saying, like, if we go in with a, I don't know what the word, but non-generous, ungenerous framework, it's a lot more narrow. Like if you go in assuming that somebody's intentionally trying to hurt you, or intentionally trying to, screw you over or something. And I'm not saying that there aren't people that do that obviously happens, but going in with that assumption, it narrows curiosity, right?
Totally.
Like, and there's no opportunity for that person to actually evolve, or like if they did make a mistake,
that's right,
to maybe for you to give them feedback and they can maybe hear you and improve in some way.
Yeah. And I think for us, this also was the podcast, When East Meets West, is us being present and brave.
Yeah.
We are very busy. And so we have a lot of things we could be doing other than recording episodes. But, we're present. We're here with each other. We like that we get to talk to each other, and also just be brave, being braving ourselves, putting ourselves out there, creating the space, the time, trying to commit to this value of educating folks, and realizing that, some people are going to judge this, and that's okay.
Yeah, and hopefully our listeners then can maybe think about like where can they I would say be brave or practice braving. Where can they practice braving, right? Like and practicing presence is required for that, right? Because it's like, where am I right now? Like, where do I feel scared? What feels hard? And where can I grow? Where do I want to grow?
And this was us, you and I, landing right on the perfect tagline: to be present and to be brave. Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, Pete.
This has been When East Meets West. I'm Dr. Pete Economo.
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin. Be present, be brave.
This has been When East Meets West. All material is based on opinion and educational training of Drs. Pete Economo and Nikki Rubin.
Content is for informational and educational purposes only.